What if I told you that the best guide to 21st century cybersecurity isn't some tech guru in Silicon Valley, but actually a general who lived 2,500 years ago? Well, believe it or not, today we're going to bridge that gap and dive into the art of cyber war.
It's a pretty wild question, right? I mean, how can a guy who commanded armies with swords and shields possibly teach us anything about defending our networks from hackers? Well, it turns out the core principles of any conflict, knowing your enemy, training your troops, and always, always having a plan, they're totally timeless. So the answer is a whole lot, actually.
So here's our battle plan for today. We're going to start by looking at the modern battlefield through some very ancient eyes. Then we'll get into assembling our forces. That's everyone from commanders to soldiers. After that, we'll set our rules of engagement, build our digital arsenal, and then prepare for what happens when defenses fail. And finally, we'll face the music. This is a never-ending war.
Okay, so our guide for this whole journey is the legendary Chinese general Sun Tzu. You've definitely heard of his work, The Art of War. It's been a go-to manual for generals, for CEOs, for centuries. What's absolutely incredible is just how perfectly his entire framework applies to building a modern information security program. It's kind of uncanny.
Sun Tzu really understood the stakes. I mean, for him, war was literally about the existence or destruction of an entire nation. Now, you fast forward to today, and for a company, a major data breach can feel just as existential, can it? The battlefield has totally changed, but the high stakes, they haven't. This is a threat that you just can't afford to take lightly.
So how do we actually translate all this ancient wisdom into something we can use? Well, it all boils down to these 5 strategic pillars that just map perfectly to a modern security program. You've got your leadership, your soldiers, the rules, the weapons, and your war plans. Let's start right at the top with the people in charge.
Look, at the end of the day, technology is just a tool. A war is won by people. So this section is all about building your army, from the generals calling the shots in the war room, all the way down to the soldiers on the digital front lines.
You know, a successful security program doesn't start with a fancy new piece of tech. It always starts with leadership. The big insight here is that security isn't just a tech problem to be solved. It's a business culture problem that really starts in the boardroom. When senior management actually champions security, that vision creates a culture where everyone, from the security manager to the brand new hire, willingly follows the plan. So building this army is a really strategic process. First, you've got to appoint your general. That's a security manager who understands both the business and the technology. Then you find your commanders, the middle managers who are going to lead the troops. You recruit skilled soldiers for the front lines, whether they're in-house staff or maybe some elite outside consultants. But just putting the army together, that's not enough. Just think about that for a second. Sun Tzu believed you could predict who was going to win a battle just by asking this one simple question. And in cyberspace, this is more true than ever before. Hacker techniques from last month are basically ancient history. And that's exactly why continuous training isn't some luxury. It's an absolutely mission-critical necessity to keep your army's skills sharp. Okay, so our army is assembled, they're trained, now what? Well, they need a clear mission and a rule book, because even the most elite soldiers in the world are totally ineffective if they don't have a coherent strategy guiding their actions.
The easiest way to think of a security policy is as your army's official rule book. And please, it should not be some dusty binder sitting on a shelf somewhere. It needs to be a living document that answers the 3 fundamental questions. What are we protecting? Why is it so valuable? And who is trying to take it from us? And this right here is exactly why those rules matter so much. On one side, you have discipline. A request comes in, it's reviewed, risks are assessed, and a change is made safely. But on the other side, you have convenience. An admin takes a shortcut, and boom, in their haste, they open a massive vulnerability. It is literally the difference between disciplined security and a wide-open invitation for disaster. Let's be real, a policy is just words on a page without enforcement. It needs teeth, and that requires buy-in from the very top. If management doesn't actively support and enforce the rules, well, then those rules are pretty much useless. All right, our people are trained, our policies are in place, so now it's time to equip our army. It's time to give them the tools they need to defend a perimeter and everything beyond it. You see the pattern here? Sun Tzu knew that victory depends on 2 things: trained soldiers and superior weapons. In our world, this means a layered defense of well-maintained and, this is key, properly configured security technologies.
This really gets at a powerful military concept called defense in depth. You see, you don't just build one big wall and hope for the best. No, you start with an outer perimeter. That's your firewalls, kind of like the digital bouncers at the door of your network. But you have to assume they can be breached, so you have interior alarms like an intrusion detection system. Then you defend against other ways in, like email viruses. And on top of all that, you secure every single person inside your walls.
So that intrusion detection system, or IDS, think of it exactly like a burglar alarm for your network. Its whole job is to spot suspicious activity that somehow gets past your main defenses and then scream and shout to let your team know something is wrong. It's your safety net for when, and I mean when, not if, the perimeter gets breached. Okay, this part is so important. Security is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. It starts to degrade almost immediately after you installed it. Why? Because new vulnerabilities are discovered daily. New viruses are written hourly. Without constant updates for patches and signatures, your state-of-the-art digital arsenal becomes an antique, fast.
Now for the fifth and final pillar of Sun Tzu's strategy, war plans. See, he knew that even the best army with the best weapons can suffer a setback. Victory isn't about never getting hit. It's about having a plan for when you do.
An incident response plan isn't about panic, it's about process. It's a clear, step-by-step path through the absolute chaos of a crisis. The goal is always to first contain the breach, then figure out what happened, recover your systems, and this is the most important part, learn from the attack so you can harden your defenses for the next time.
Okay, let's tie all of this together. If you take just one single thing away from this whole explainer, it should be this. You can't just go out, buy a box, plug it in, and call yourself secure. It just doesn't work that way. It's a constant, evolving process.
And there it is, straight from the master himself. Victory comes from understanding these 5 areas completely. They are not a checklist you complete just one time. They are a continuous, interconnected cycle of preparation, defense, and improvement, over and over again. So let's just recap those 5 keys to victory one last time. You need strong leadership. You need a well-trained team. You need clear and enforced rules. You need layered defenses. And you absolutely need a plan for failure. Get these 5 things right, and you are truly practicing the art of cyber war. And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most important question of all. We've explored the philosophy, but now it's time to turn the lens on your own battlefield. So, is your organization really ready for the fight?